Hi guys, Ingenium. Today we're going to be looking at the Mercedes 3 litre V6 Turbo Diesel or CDi. It's the OM642. We're going to go with some common faults, common problems, things that stop your car from boosting. These are generally the main problems that you'll have with the engine anyway, that'll stop you boosting, going into limp mode. These can be intermittent or they can happen all the time, so we'll go with some of them and we'll see what's what. The first thing we're going to start off with is the most obvious one, which is the DPF, or the diesel particulate filter. This car doesn't actually have a DPF fitted, but most modern Mercedes will have DPFs fitted. They get clogged, sometimes they don't regen properly. A lot of people think that, oh, it's clogged, I'll just smash it on the motorway, 4th gear for half an hour, and that'll force regen. That's not always the case. Regen has conditions that need to be met. For example, are your glow plugs working? Is your coolant up to temperature? So for example, if your thermostat's not working or your glow plugs aren't right, you'll never get into regen basically, and your DPF will stay clogged. So make sure you meet all these conditions. This is kind of outside the scope of the video, but you would probably need to get it looked at from a DPF specialist. I mean, you could cut them out, but in the UK now that's currently illegal. I'm not sure about in other places. Sometimes they even cut them out, and then they knock all the DPF out. They weld them back up, so if a visual inspector is doing an MOT, he'll just look at it, but I'm not condoning that. That's wrong, you shouldn't do that. You should get the DPF replaced. They're not that expensive and they'll last another 100,000 miles, so that's the first thing to look at. Right, the next thing we're going to have a look at is the infamous swill flap motor. So just, here's your fuel filter, there's your turbo, and obviously there's the intake. Underneath here, just underneath there, is your swill flap motor. That controls your swill flaps. They're little flaps that are supposed to cause turbulence and help low end torque and emissions and things like that. I don't know if they do any of that, but they break. When the motor breaks, it'll throw a code. Basically what happens is oil leaks from this bit here, and that'll drip down onto the motor, and when the motor shorts out or breaks or whatever, it'll throw a code and it'll stop you boosting. Basically the fix for that is to use the resistor mod. You get, I think it's either a 4K or a 4.7K ohm resistor, and you stick it in, and that'll that should fix it. I think this car's already had that done because I had a look at that. But yeah, that's kind of a fairly simple and cheap fix for the swill flap motor if that breaks, and that's quite a common one. Second thing to look at as well, or third thing rather after the DPF, is you have this pipe here, which is your intake. That's your air filter there, and your other air filter is over here. I like to call this the moustache pipe because it kind of looks like a moustache kind of, but well, not really, but anyway. So this Y pipe, so this comes into here and this comes into here, and plugged into them is a MAF, which is in there and in there. Sometimes this pipe can crack up here, so you can get obviously air leaks, but the other thing to keep an eye on as well is these MAFs themselves here and here. After many years, many miles, they can fail. Typical Mercedes, smart thinking, so they're giving you two MAFs here, so you should be able to replace them. Nope. They only sell this pipe by itself with two MAFs, £600 from Merc dealers. Yep, you know what I mean, you can't even just say, well, I'll just take out this MAF, or I'll take out this MAF. Nope, you have to buy the whole pipe with the two MAFs installed. That's the only way to sell it. eBay do them for 300 to 350 quid for new ones, but it's still a lot of money for something that you should just be able to take out this MAF, replace it. But Mercedes have got to make their money somehow, don't they? Following on from that last problem, well, this actually caused the problem with swill flap motors, but can you see this here? There's an orange gasket. There's actually an orange gasket here as well in the PCV valve. But these valves, they sit in between your intake and your turbo, or your intake and your PCV, and they're supposed to provide like a tighter tolerance. But what happens after time and age, they harden, they stiffen, they crack, they leak. So you'll get air leaks, boost leaks, unmetered air going in, dirty air going in, and that'll just throw everything off and make your car run horribly. And this one here, when this one leaks, oil can be pulled in from the PCV, so that'll go in there, and instead of getting sucked into the turbo, what will happen is it'll leak out, and as it leaks out, it'll go into your swill flap motor, and that's what burns out your swill flap motor. Mercedes haven't seemed to have fixed this problem. This is a 2006 car, and cars as late as 2014 are still seeing this, so I don't know what they were thinking, but that's another problem. On the note about boost leaks as well, so like it says, here is the main place that it happens. Usually here, this pipe can sometimes crack, these pipes can sometimes crack. There's also another thing just here. This is where this pipe joins onto the turbo. There's like a little green O-ring in there that can break as well. Boost leaks are an absolute pain to find, but they are quite common in this sort of area, so this is the best place to start. One of the next things that can break on the turbo is this here, the Turbo Actuator. So basically these are VNT or variable vane turbos. Supposedly it increases low-end performance, top-end performance, all that stuff. But anyway, so these are the actuators, and these control the wastegate as well, if I'm not mistaken. So what can basically happen is sometimes they just go all together. They've got gears and worm drives in them, and they can break and fall apart. So obviously it'll stop working. The person I actually bought this car from had a fault where it was working intermittently. So when it was cold, it was boosting fine, no problem. The car would heat up, go into limp mode, stop boosting. It was just a nightmare. The electronics in here can break down as well. So there's like solder pads, and you can open it up and you can redo the solder pads, and you can get worm gear replacement kits and things like that. What I found was just easier is I sent this away to a guy in Birmingham called Turbo Vanes. Make sure you get the right model number. He'll help you out as well, but make sure you choose your model, make sure you get all the numbers right and things like that. You order one of these, they cost £200. He'll send you one, you fit it to your car, and then what you can do is if you send this back, your broken one, to him, he'll give you £100 back. So it's only really £100 repair, which is fantastic in my opinion, and it's fully refurbished in there, new worm gears, new electronics, new everything. You can buy Chinese copy ones, but I've not heard good things. One, they just say OM642, but there's OM642s in literally everything, and they run different boost pressures. So for example, this C-Class runs a bit different boost pressure from the 300C, which I also think this engine's in. So you have to be really careful. And plus, for £100, I mean, I would just go with a proper Hella one. It's rebuilt, it's guaranteed for life, if not 5 or 10 years or something like that. It's something ridiculous, so if you shouldn't have any trouble with that. Like I said, the person I actually bought this car from, their garage couldn't figure out what was wrong with this car, and they were quoted them for, they says basically this actuator doesn't come from Mercedes, you can't buy that, you have to buy the whole new turbo, and they were quoted £2,100 or £2,100 just in parts alone, and fitting would have been another £500 to £1,000 possibly. So this thing here saved me a lot of money, and this is why I got this car for cheap. So your turbo actuator is really, really important. Again, this is the one that when it's running hot, it can cause problems. So keep an eye on that one, turbo actuator. You can get these codes from the turbo actuator, a P2510 or a P0244. The P2510, I think that's something to do with boost pressure or something like that, but that's usually what causes it. Your next thing to look at as well is this thing over here. I'll just move the light. That is your exhaust back pressure sensor. It's fairly easy to replace. You just need a big socket, get it on there, whip it off. That can throw codes sometimes from P071, 2616, 2032, 2359, 2696. Some people say there's a hole in there and you can clean it with either like sensor cleaner or brake cleaner. I mean, I wouldn't recommend either. Well, maybe sensor cleaner, but definitely not brake cleaner. But for the price of it, I would just replace it if you are, because it's something that's going to be next to the turbo, it's going to be hammered. So if you do have a problem with that, just replace it. So that's a lot of the problems with the OM642. Before you do anything though, please get your codes read. I know it's a bit of a pain, but get a Bluetooth reader, get a cheap code reader, plug it in, read your codes. I get it, it's not as like comprehensive as Star or anything like that, but it's still a good place to know where you're going wrong. Otherwise you can get your codes read, and then you know in the general area to look at. In a car like this, for example, if your MAF's gone, you spend 350 quid on that. These gaskets are gone, they're like 30, 40 quid. You get this done, that's 100 quid, that's like 50 quid. You can't just start throwing money at this car, because you'll be thousands of pounds into debt after, you know, possibly not even fixing it. Whereas if you read the codes, you should have a rough idea where you're kind of at. You can always post up the codes in the comment section as well, and I'll see if I can help you as well. But the swirl motor is one of the more common ones, as is the actuator, and the exhaust back pressure sensor. Obviously the DPF is quite common as well. MAFs are less common, but they are starting to go now that they're older. So do that. Like I said, so a cheap reader will do the job. A Star's obviously better if you've got a friend with the Star diagnostics machine, or you got a friendly independent garage. I mean, you could even go Mercedes, but you know, we all know what's going to happen if you go to Mercedes. But if you've got an independent who can read codes on Star, it'll give you a much better place of starting out. So you know, with codes, then you can say, well, it's something to do with boost, or something to do with this, or something to do with that, and that way you'll have a rough idea. Otherwise, like I said, you'll be throwing money at this car, and if you're not getting anywhere, you'll get very, very disheartened with it, just like the previous owner did with this one. I hope that was a fairly informative video for you guys. I know it's a bit boring, but I wish I'd saw a video like this when I bought this car, or I wish my friend had saw this video when he was trying to fix his car. This OM642 engine is fairly reliable. Not the best engine Mercedes has made, in my opinion. It's smooth and it's fast, but it's not really great on fuel, and it's got a lot of these small... to be fair, it's not an unreliable engine, but it's got a few of these small quirks that can cost a fair bit of money to put right, and that's stuff that kind of annoys me. But yeah, like I said, it's not too bad. And hopefully, with these fixes, or these things to keep out a lookout for, you won't be without your car for too long, or it won't cost you that much money when you're fixing it. The swirl flap motor is a fairly cheap fix. It's only like maybe £1, £2, something like that for a resistor. The MAF one, that's more expensive, but that is more uncommon. This is only £100. Well, actually, if you are going to replace this though as well, there's a circlip on the back that needs to be replaced as well. Lastly, with this as well, some people will tell you, oh, just test if it's working. Never ever ever move the arm, because you'll damage the gears. Also, when I bought this car, I was told to check the actuator motor. You can cycle the ignition, and if it turns on and if the arm's moving or something like that, that means it's fine. But again, this was an intermittent problem with these things, so the gears were fine. It was the electronics that had broken down, so that is something to keep an eye as well. It's not 100% reliable information to say if the arm's going up and down, it's fine. The exhaust back pressure sensor, I know somebody who bought a Mercedes recently. They bought it cheap, it wasn't boosting, they replaced that and it was good to go. So if you're buying a Mercedes with an OM642 cheap, great, look at these things first. If it's not boosting, hopefully it's nothing more serious. I mean, your last thing to look at is obviously your turbo. The turbo's actually been refurbished on here, so I know it's good, but if you're blowing blue smoke and it's making all sort of funny noises, hope it's not the turbo, because my friend got quoted £2,100 for a brand new turbo on this, and that was without fitting. So, you know, they can get expensive. Obviously, they're a lot cheaper on eBay, but yeah, they can get expensive really quickly. Well, I hope that helped you guys. Cheers.